Hi everyone, special video for you today. We are going to go over the tuning changes coming to NHL 24 based on the community playtest, and to go over all of the details for this Day 0 release, I've got the EA NHL Creative Director Mike Inglehart to join us and walk us through all of the big changes coming to the game. Thank you, Mike, for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here.
So let's start out with the changes that were already announced almost immediately following the community playtest, and that was the hybrid control. First off, hybrid controls are coming back as an additional option. What were you hearing from the community, and what was that process like?
Yeah, so I mean, we tried to make with a lot of the gameplay features coming this year. We added a lot more functionality to the game, and as you know, like the controller is quite populated. So when we made Total Control, the idea was that we wanted to enable people that have played on hybrid to have more functionality with Total Control. Obviously, there's a ton of passion for hybrid that we learned from the community playtest. So, we wanted to make sure people got what they wanted. So we're bringing hybrid back. Total Control will remain. So if people do want to dabble in something new, they can. But given the passion around hybrid and what it means to the existing player base, the right thing to do was to bring that back so people have access to it for 24.
I do love the fact that it's an addition, not removing something to put something back in. We can appreciate that bringing back hybrid control is not at the loss of skill stick or something else. I think that was definitely the right way to do it. The second one was adding the option to use the new goalie tether control scheme or the standard goalie control system, which is what user goaltenders were using in NHL 23. That was a pretty big change as well.
Yeah, so again, another spot where, we wanted to grow the goalie position and add something new to the game. I think the lesson here too is I think we can add new things to the product, but I think we want to also keep things that people have been happy using. So I think that's a lesson we'll take with us going forward. So in light of that, legacy goalie controls will work their way back with hybrid controls. So people that have learned how to play the game a certain way will have that function back within the crease. And then anybody who's new to the game who wants to play goalie, they'll have the choice. They can either play the old school way, the way players have been doing for years, or dabble in the new tether system, which is in the game already.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the changes, I mean, everyone playing the community playtest, it's such a jarring change year over year with the new total controls as well as the new goalie controls. So it'll be interesting to see as everyone kind of gets used to the new controls if people start making that changeover. But it was definitely appreciated throughout the community for adding those back in. So let's get started with the tuning patch that's coming at the launch of the game based on the feedback from the community playtest. Let's start with the sustained pressure system tuning. So again, the feedback from the community was the puck possession aspects of the sustained pressure system. They were too powerful, and the growth of the system, which encouraged puck ragging or offensive zone puck ragging, essentially, where you just kind of skated around and away from your opponent. Additionally, the defensive team did not have many ways to counter the system, making it feel a little bit unbalanced at times. So tell us what you've got in terms of changes for that.
Yeah, so I mean, we heard that loud and clear. And again, everybody's feedback during the CPT was great, and that's why it's there. And so, I mean, all this feedback is going to help us heading towards that October 3rd early access date. So yeah, puck ragging, obviously a controversial thing in the game historically, and not something we want to reward in too many ways. So we've tuned down what puck possession means to the sustained pressure meter in the offensive zone. So we've ratcheted that down by 30%. So if you're possessing the puck and you're trying just to run the meter from 0 to max holding it, it's gonna be really hard to do. And it's obviously, that's not playing hockey as well. We want to encourage more action, shots on goals and hits. Those carry more weight now with the tuning down of the puck possession. So if you're close to filling the meter, winning a face-off and hanging on for a few seconds, I think that's viable. You've earned the meter, probably other ways to get to that point. But now just hanging on to the puck is not going to be the sort of trump card, if you will, to filling the meter. So I think people will be happy with that change. In addition, on the defensive side, one big change we've made is if the defensive team gets the puck and before sustained pressure activates, if they can get the puck outside their defensive zone, the decay rate in which the meter will be undone has been increased by 100%. So this change was done for a bunch of reasons. One was to make sure that defensive team can counter any work that's happened. It's also sort of tuned the system so that it's not going to happen an abundance of time during gameplay. We want Again, I think we've talked about the pressure system being a complement to the core gameplay. Not every shift in hockey is a sustained pressure shift. And the other cool thing now that's emergent from this tuning is to get sustained pressure, you need to get the puck into the attacking zone, and you need to build on that shift. If that puck escapes the blue line, you're going to have to redo some of the work that's gone in. So the puck now, when it's in, you're attacking. If you continue doing that, you're probably going to get to a chance where sustained pressure kicks in. If the defense team can get it out, it flattens it, and you're going to have to rebuild that attack next time. So we feel we've addressed these issues, and I think honestly made it more authentic to hockey with this feedback and the tuning pass we've done.
I think like the biggest things in terms of what I found is that it promotes like just extremely active gameplay, meaning that you can't really sit in the middle while defending because the meter, will fill, as well as on the defensive side of things. Like you really have to play aggressive to make sure that you don't get that meter and you're able to get it out. So the meter, once you increasing, the meter decreasing immediately when you get out of the zone is a huge change for sure, because it allows the players that once they've kind of survived that possession to be able to get out and kind of settle things down a little bit. I noticed that it's on shots and big hits in the offensive zone. They've now strengthened. Are passes going to be strengthened as well, or just shots and big hits?
So just shots and big hits. So like passing itself, so people know, has never been part of growing the system. So again, there's different perceptions out there from how you play it. The only benefit you get from passing is retaining possession. Yeah. But the build only happens when somebody actually has physical possession of the puck. And we stayed away from that because, as much as puck ragging can be an exploit, you can imagine somebody just doing quick tic-tac passes behind the net to build it, and that's not hockey as well. So we stayed away from passing just because you can kind of see the tea leaves of where potentially the exploits could be.
These two changes specifically, I think, are going to be fantastic for the system. The one thing I noticed as well while playing the community playtest was the shots on goal per game. Historically, once you get in Division 2 and Division 1 and Hockey Ultimate Team specifically, you kind of play a different, it's a different game. And you're really just low shots, waiting for that perfect one to always kind of come down to the wire. Whereas I was playing games where I had like 50 combined shots, because a lot of it you get rewarded for actually shooting the puck. And I think that this is only going to increase that, and it's going to look a lot more like real hockey. So excited to see these two get implemented into the game. Let's go on to the goalie fatigue system. So this was another massive system added into the game. The new goalie fatigue system, from the feedback from the community, was its tuning has resulted in the goalies being way too active, flopping around far too frequently, resulting in netminders that feel too loose, as they seemingly are always using desperation saves. This always makes the goalie feel less authentic. That's something that I definitely noticed early on. Just an example that I had would you could get across the blue line and just kind of fire a low shot from the point. It didn't have to be a slap shot, anything, just a wrist shot, and it would kind of trigger one of those desperation save states. So what are the changes coming to the goalie fatigue system in this tuner?
Yeah, so we have a collection of changes coming, and I'll just kind of go through what they are, and they all work together to I think really tighten up the goalies. I think people will be happy with where they've gotten to. So the first one is the goalie starting to recover when the puck exits the defensive zone. So it's kind of a theme here of the puck leaving the defensive zone being something that benefits the defensive team. So if you just had a huge flurry on the goalie, the second the puck now exits your own team zone, your goalie will start to get some energy back, which is a big change compared to where we were before. What people played in the CPT, it was the opposing team's blue line is where we had it. So it was definitely far too loose. So even if you got the puck in the neutral zone and you're playing a little bit of ping pong going back and forth with possession, your goalie wasn't reaping any benefits, which in the end, while we were trying to make sure these systems are active and we're able to play them and see them working, it was just too detrimental to the goalie. So now, again, getting the puck out of your blue line, anybody that has hockey acumen knows chipping it out of the blue line, getting a change, resetting things, a lot of benefits come from that. And the goalie now will benefit the second the puck gets out over your blue line. That's more of just one that helps to communicate the state of the goalie. So this really was just an addition that we thought just really rallies around the system, was making the goalie fatigue meter always visible. And we felt that this will help to tell a story as to understanding, like you were talking before, when is it a good time to get a puck on net? Understanding defensively, my goalie's in a lot of trouble. I need to get that puck out of the blue line so the recovery can happen. Should I take a whistle because my goalie is completely gassed? And just because your goalie's gassed doesn't mean you're going to see him or her flopping all over the crease. So that, I think, has been a good change because it'll create consistent messaging as to where your goalie's at, potentially why the puck has gone into the net against the fatigue state. And so that was an additional thing that we've added in that we think just strengthens the overall system. We've also linked the system more into goalie attributes now. So in the CPT, goalie fatigue was sort of a universal, uniform thing that wasn't really worked into goalie attributes the way it should have been. So how fast the goalie drains, how fast the goalie recovers, there will be a relationship to the goalie's respective attributes. So a better rated goalie will recover faster and drain a little bit slower. Now, it's not going to be something that becomes, if you have a high-end goalie in net, that they become someone that can't let in a goal, but we've just created that connection there so you can feel a slight difference. Again, we've already seen in tuning a goalie that's a bit, a few points lower on the attribute scale can still throw up a shutout and play the game of their life. But we felt from an authenticity standpoint, there should be some connection into better goalies having a slight edge when it comes to this system. And probably the one that's going to carry the most weight in everything that we're talking about is creating states around the goalie's fatigue level. So if a goalie is 50% energy left or above, they're going to remain in what we call a stable and positional state. So again, in the CPT, we heard everybody loud and clear. They were just kind of fish flopping out of water in the crease way too much. If your goalie is rested, they're going to be throwing more what we call traditional saves, closing down angles, using the butterfly, not flopping. The second they get below 50%, the desperation save opportunities will start to climb. And so the more tired the goalie gets, the more likely they're going to be taking more risks because they're just in that state where their energy has been completely depleted. And what we're seeing now so far in gameplay testing is goalies throwing up, 900 plus save percentages in a game because you have to now break them down. And so there is that micro game within the meta of wearing a goalie out. If you're just going to take, loose wrist shots from the wide angles, it's not going to do anything. The goalie's just going to sit there and kind of laugh at you, catching the puck, getting the whistle and saying, okay, let's go again. So peppering the goalie, wearing them down, you're going to feel that battle now, which I think is more on line with what people expect to see with a system like this.
I love all of these changes. I have a couple questions when it comes to attributes. First of all, the fatigue meter actually be showing on the goaltender, because I believe it shows on all the players. That's a fantastic one for sure, so that there's a little bit more understanding from the player base when you're going to start to see those, and it not happening until it goes under 50% is nice. You mentioned that it's going to be tied to their attributes. Is that meaning that all of their attributes are going to come down in a fatigue state, or will their endurance rating slow down the drain of their fatigue?
So just the easiest way to talk about this is if you're a 90 rated goalie versus a 70 rated goalie, a 90 rated goalie, their energy is going to drain marginally slower, and the recovery will be marginally faster compared to that 70 goalie. So again, it's not a wide chasm, because if we were to do that, the top end goalies would be unbeatable in the game, which is not anything we want. It was just giving a bit more of a curve to the fact that there are different goalies in the NHL, so that the actual level of the goalie plays a small part. It's not a massive thing. It's not meant to disrupt the game, but it's meant just to connect into the goalies a little bit more, because you're a goalie, you're an all-star for a reason, as well as you're somebody that's a perpetual backup for a reason. But again, it doesn't break the game. It's just more of having a connection that's in it. So it's a slight change, not something you're going to massively feel in the overall experience, but it's there. And I think it will make differences here and there from game to game, depending on the situation.
That brings up another question as well about just players in general and their fatigue and how their energy drains. Is it tied to their endurance rating? So let me give you an example. 2 players rated 90 overall. Somebody has a 70 overall endurance rating. Someone has a 90 overall endurance rating. Will the player with 90 overall endurance lose or gain fatigue just the same value because they're both 90 overall? Or will that endurance rating be the one that dictates how fast and slow the energy drain happens?
So again, it's slight connections to these things. It's because if we're to tune that stuff too closely to specific attributes, you might have a player out there that blows their energy meter in the blink of an eye. And then the problem is that player becomes potentially unplayable or not useful. And, again, there's always a balance making a game between trying to replicate real life and what's fun in the experience. So things like that, they do connect in, but you have to be mindful also what's fun. And having a player that gets gassed, ultra quick compared to somebody else, may defeat the purpose of even having that player on the ice, which that player's on the ice for other reasons in the NHL, but making all those things work correctly one-to-one and still having a video game be fun, that's a delicate balance. So again, that stuff is all connected, but it has marginal impact because we still have to make sure the game is fun and playable underneath all the attributes and the tuning that we've done.
No, for sure. I was simply this is the hockey ultimate team nerd in me, just thinking that, like, maybe endurance matters a little bit more than in prior games, and marginally, even if that is the case, it's not a blanket, everything just goes down at the same time. That at least is, endurance might be the tiebreaker if you're trying to decide on cards and things like that. So that's interesting. And again, I think the changes to the goalie system, obviously, yeah, the community was definitely loud, and I noticed it in the games myself where we saw the desperation save just a little too much. But these changes look to kind of clear all of that up. So a lot of good there. Next up is the physics-based contact. So the feedback from the community was the hitting has some points of concern, such as hip checks at slow speeds, resulting in massive collisions that make little sense, and the reverse hit is way too overpowered and appears to disregard player size, which is unrealistic. Definitely noticed the hip checks, because with the total control system, you're allowing every player to basically have that hit available to them. And it's funny, a lot of people focused on the Michigan and everything like that, which we'll talk about, and all of the dekes with total control. I found the defense from the total control scheme being what was really the fun part of it, because I'd hazard a guess that a lot of people didn't even know how to do a hip check because of how complicated it was with the skill stick. So that was definitely one. I saw a ton of hip checks, and when you connect on them, so satisfying. But there was definitely a point where, your players are both going like, a couple miles an hour at the end of the shift, and then it still delivered that big check. So what are the changes coming to the physics-based contact?
Yeah, so we had a lot of changes here. I'll go back to your previous point, though, like as people play the game. So I think like what we're doing here today, like this is kind of the start of, we want to make sure we're taking in feedback. So like, again, over the course of the year, like, if you or other people out there are playing hot or whatever mode and say, hey, it would be cool if, with the player stamina in the game, we'd like it more connected to endurance. And could you guys look at that? All that feedback is really valuable, right? So I just want to kind of make sure that door is open for people as well, because maybe we could go a little bit further over time. And maybe somebody who is not in the same physical condition in the NHL as a McDavid or somebody like that who can go all game, there might be more room there. So I think that feedback is valuable, and happy to continue to collect that from everybody over the course of the year. But getting back to the physics-based contact side, so first thing we did, kind of relating back to stamina, we increased the damage that a big hit does to stamina just a little bit more. Again, we put a lot of work in the game this year of having different types of recovery. If you've ever played hockey and taken a really big open ice hit, it's not a pleasant experience, and you're not popping back up to your feet in the blink of an eye. And so we did a change there to make sure that the recoveries that happen, the reward that you get for throwing a big hit, that the players are getting that benefit in the game. So there's a slight change there. Again, one check's not going to keep a guy down for minutes, but subsequent hits will result in that state being seen a little bit more in gameplay. As far as reverse hits go, there's a couple of things that we've done there. The first one is player size plays much more of a part now in terms of the impact. So again, it was one of these things where it was, I think, too universally put into the game. So obviously being a Sabres fan, like trucking over defenders with Jeff Skinner, not something that you're probably going to see. Was it fun? Sure, but probably a bit too gratuitous. So smaller players, they can stand up a big defender, and there is timing windows in there where you could actually, with a player like Skinner, knock a bigger player over, but it's not going to be as gratuitous as it was. So size will play a much bigger part in the reverse hit. As well as what we did, the reverse hit was very beneficial for the player that threw it. You could run over a player and you'd suffer no speed loss, which again, reverse hits are, they're devastating. There's something that you can retain possession with, but there's no way you can continue skating at full speed. So we've also added in a slight bit of friction when the check is thrown. So the player that throws the reverse check will slow down ever so slightly. Again, a teammate could swoop in and pick up the loose puck. Sometimes, depending on the situation, if it's a a 2-on-1 and the defender sells the farm and you throw the reverse hit and counter it, you'll still probably have time to skate around the fallen defender and pick up the puck yourself. But it no longer becomes this OP thing where players can just manipulate it and it becomes something you go back to time and time again. So I think both those changes will really help with the feedback we got around reverse hits. And then lastly, hip checks and low speeds. So we've addressed that. You're not going to see the the hip checks are kind of one of those things. It's kind of the gift that keeps on giving. It definitely, we still find ourselves stopping and watching the replays because there's just some great moments in there. I mean, they're dramatic in the NHL in the first place. But if players are going, a couple miles an hour, you're not going to see the stuff that you saw in the CPT. So just dialing that in to get more of a representative outcome. If you throw a hip and you're moving slow and the skater's moving slow, they're going to bump together. You're not going to see a head over heels reaction in that situation.
I have a question. These are fantastic because I think one of the bigger issues was you'd see a lot of players just getting a hip check on someone, not even connecting the hip check and just kind of clipping, and it would still react as if he was crushed. So seeing that adjusted is going to be a huge improvement for sure on that end. I have a question. This again, I'm not sure if you'd be able to answer this one, but truculence is one of the more famous abilities that's in NHL just because it allows you to deliver massive hits and it allows the smaller players to be a little more viable on contact and the bigger players to be devastating. Does truculence impact reverse hitting, or is it only the back at you ability? Would you know that one?
Yeah, it doesn't have an impact to reverse hitting.
Perfect. Okay, that's great to know because that makes back at you a lot more of a special ability if truculence does not play into that at all. So love to hear that. Next up, we've got the Global Lacrosse Deke tuning. This was obviously, I think, going to be one of the major focuses early on when the community got a hold of the new total control scheme. With the Lacrosse Deke now being accessible to everyone, it is constantly being used and seems to be far too overpowered, which hurts the move's authenticity as compared to the NHL. So what's coming for the Lacrosse Deke in 24?
Yeah, so I mean, Lacrosse Deke is still going to be there. So we're still going to keep it as part of the experience. But again, so I mean, I think a positive is a lot of people got to do the lacrosse that never probably had a chance to do it before. Downside is I think everybody was just doing the lacrosse.
A lot of games
and obviously you don't want this game to turn into the lacrosse hockey game. So what we did was we tied the that deke specifically into the deking attribute that's connected to a player. And so no matter which control set you're using, this rule will apply across the game. So if you're somebody that has, an abysmal deke attribute, you can still execute the move, but the move is going to be substantially slower. So what this is going to do is give the defending team a lot more time to get in behind the net and basically lay the body on you and deter that from happening. I think also on the offensive side, unless you're driving behind the net with somebody that has what is considered a justified deking attribute where they would pull off or try to pull off something like this, it becomes sort of something that you're not really motivated to do, right? We want people to use it and feel it. And I think there's the fantasy of playing hockey and doing things that are not easy to do in real life. And I think we've made that easier, but we probably went too far one way. So now, again, if you're going back there with a Svechnikov or a Zegras, probably a better player to try it with. Pick any of your, low-end fourth liners that are out there to maybe bruise and get in other people's face during a game. Not going to have the most success doing it with them. Could you still pull it off if you're playing with the Leafs? Could you still yank one in with Ryan Reeves?
I was about to say, Revo.
You planned it out correctly and maybe laid everybody out in the zone before you tried it, but you better make sure you have a big enough window because I think players of that nature, it's going to be a lot tougher to try. And I think in most cases, you won't even bother trying to execute it based on how we tuned it.
One of the things that was rumored out there that was that the community playtest doing the Lacrosse Deke in the community playtest was far easier than what it would be at launch. So aside from the new deking changes where it's tied to your actual deke rating, is it going to play similar to that? Like, is it still pretty easy to pull off, but it's just going to take a lot longer?
So yeah, I mean the long and short, I think again everybody's going to have different perceptions over was something easier, was it not? The tuning itself was the tuning we've had all the way through from when the move went into the actual game, whether it was the setting or whatever the case may be. But the reality with this tuning now is it's going to be, I think, overall much harder to execute because of this change. And again, you're going to have to find those top-notch players to to execute with. So that's really the only change that we've made based on what's there. Because the animation, it plays the same for everybody once it executes. There's no sense of it's going to get wrapped in the net easier with this player or that player. The animation plays out the same correctly each time. You have to find the right spot behind the net to execute the move, right? If you go too late, you don't have an angle on the net. Too early, you're going to hit the back of the net. But other than that, there was nothing else that fed into it. Now, the slowdown when you have a bad deking attribute, that's going to be the big thing that people feel, which should balance this out. I think it's okay if people try it. If you're going to try it over and over again, you're probably going to end up losing those games because it's not going to result in the success you're looking for.
I didn't have it scored on me in my 20 games playing in the technical test, but I was someone that was kind of playing for that. And I think after launch of the game, I think people will stop. I think that because it was so new and available to everyone, that a lot of games were just, okay, I'm going to do this. And I think that frustration will probably set in, especially, again, I'm more of a Hockey Ultimate Team focused player that early on attributes are a little bit lower. So it is going to be hard to find those players that can pull it off seamlessly. But again, I think much like the reverse hitting and things like that in terms of X Factor abilities, I think maybe having skilled up, which, there was only a handful of people in the world that could do the Michigan in the prior games. Now, and with skilled up, so not a lot of people really went after that ability. I think now it makes players that have skilled up as an ability a lot more viable because it is a little bit easier to pull off, and if you're able to do it. I noticed that a lot of players just stood behind the net and then tried it. It's so easy to defend, but if you come in with some speed and on the right angle, you can make it look real smooth. So I'm excited to see what those changes look like come the launch. Speaking of X Factors, there was a pretty big, in terms of the meta over the last 2 years, in terms of X Factors, and that was the close quarters X Factor. Remained too powerful and needs to be adjusted so it can be used in a balanced state. In the current tuning, it tends to be outlawed in competitive leagues in terms of World of Chell. Despite the desire to want to employ this X Factor, I know as a Hockey Ultimate Team player, it quickly became one of the best abilities because it was tied to an animation, not just attributes. So what's coming for close quarters with this tuner?
Yeah, so just a tuning pass to get it more balanced for that competitive play. So 3 main things we've done there. So we've reduced the distance required to activate close quarters from 30 feet to 20 feet. So you gotta get tighter, and obviously the more you close down to the front of the net, bodies start to pile up, and so that's going to play a part in finding that sort of safe space to actually use it. We've reduced the accuracy bonus by 50%, so it doesn't become as, it was never guaranteed, but I think in some cases it felt guaranteed. Yeah. And then the accuracy bonus of the close quarters superstar ability is down by 75%. So I want to clarify here too, it doesn't mean that close quarters is useless. I think most people go, yeah, maybe, does that dumb it down completely where it becomes something I don't want? That's not the case. This just removes, I think, that sort of always goal perception that a lot of people had around close quarters.
Yeah, especially I think with the change in what we're going to see and how the game is played for majority, we're going to see a lot more shots on net just from the changes to the sustained pressure system. So close quarters in its current state would have been, already one of the best, if not the best. And now when you've got a kind of I hate using the word meta, but gameplay meta of just shooting a lot more, that close quarters obviously is going to be just such an advantage to have on a lot of your players. So I think that these are pretty good changes to it, especially removing. I think you could activate it between the face-off dots, and obviously that makes it just that much more powerful. So the reduction of distance is definitely going to play into. So I do like to see that. Do you look at any other X Factors that have the potential to change and that are on your radar off the top of your head?
I mean, X Factors, I think, is a system that we're looking at in sort of totality. I think there's probably a lot of opportunity for X Factors. It's not something that we have right in front of us right now, but as we look out to the future, I think X Factors is definitely a place where I know there's a lot of feedback and a lot of different perception of ones that are very powerful and other ones that potentially don't really do a whole lot. So I'd say we're looking closely at X Factors and how it connects to our future.
Would love to see an X Factor ability that negates the sustained pressure meter. Maybe
Yeah, that's true,
maybe
yeah.
kind of cool, player doesn't
Humanity
get tired.
creates new opportunities, right? For
There
sure.
we go. Maybe. All right, human goalie. So we already found out that you're bringing back the legacy controls, so what you were basically used to in the prior games. The current tether system, it felt a little too restrictive in terms of how far the goalie can challenge and making it hard to cut down in angles. The fatigue system appears to be impacting human goalies too much based on active adjustment, and the instinct system feels too punishing in terms of guessing incorrectly on a save location. So what's coming in terms of the human goalies?
Yeah, so first change, and wasn't too surprising, was a lot of people were saying that don't have the freedom to challenge. I'm locked in. I feel like I'm boxed in, almost like a bubble hockey goalie, where you only have a limited amount of space to waggle back and forth. So we've increased the movement range from 3 feet to 5 feet. So in terms of game space, when you're playing from the goalie camera, it's a substantial change, almost doubled the space that's there. That's going to allow people to move a little bit more outside the edges of the crease and have a bit more ability to challenge per se without enabling the challenge control on the tethered control set. So that'll make people feel less like they're boxed in or kind of in goalie jail, if you will, based on the initial tuning we had. We also increased this is sort of all encompassing to the goalie system. We added the instinct system this year. We increased the goalie instinct boost when correct. So it was, there was a boost there, but it wasn't really providing a lot of impact. So we've really done that up so that if you're playing that micro game, and if you do guess correctly, and if you think in real life, if a goalie does predict where you're going to shoot, oftentimes, like as a shooter, you kind of maybe telegraphed it, like that goalie was right on what I was going to do, and it just felt like you wasted an opportunity. So we want to make sure that people are doing the instinct system, that they feel the benefit is actually worth using that additional control. And along line with that, we removed the penalty when you guess wrong. So it's already hard enough to play goalie in this game. It's hard enough to play, I think, goalie in real life. So people can now enact the instinct system, bring it to life. And if they're wrong, well, if you're wrong and you're tired, you're probably going to get scored on in certain situations. So the downside already exists within the system, right? Like being a goalie, you're either going to protect the net completely or you're going to get scored on a handful of times. So now you're going to be, basically encouraged to use the instinct system, as much as you want without the detriment of it coming back to hurt you. Because if you're risking something to make a save and then you fail and it's double hurting you along the way, some of the feedback is like, what's the point of using it? It's better to just play without it, and that defeats the purpose of having it in there. And then lastly, definitely as people are nuancing in the crease and they're moving around and they're adjusting, or they maybe throw a preemptive save before a shot gets taken, all that stuff was contributing to the fatigue setting in, the energy going down. So we've retuned the fatigue impact on human goalies to give the human goalie a bit more leeway to play with. So again, it doesn't imbalance the game. The AI is definitely going to be as smart as it can be in terms of how it uses energy. It doesn't really readjust the way a human player does based on what they're seeing or reacting to. And so we put that in a better place where goalies shouldn't feel anymore like they're being penalized for doing like specific goalie movements throughout the course of a period.
I think that the removing of the penalty is definitely huge. I'm excited to see, the goalie community is very passionate, and I think that we saw, a lot of the players that play human goalie, exclusively were very vocal about it. But I think that the removal of the penalty is actually pretty big, and obviously increasing the tether distance. Something that just an idea that I just thought of while you were talking about it. When it comes to AI, especially, bigger goaltenders have kind of always been the go-to, and I think when it comes to AI, it's very difficult to make it where all goalies play the same, obviously, because, smaller goaltenders more agile. You think of like UC Saros, for example. I think that an interesting thing might be maybe their energy drains much less. Like on a bigger goaltender, maybe it drains a lot faster, something like that. Just thought of, I don't know if that has a potential chance, but I just something I thought about, because I know that's always a big topic of discussion, is just that whoever the biggest goaltender is, right?
I wonder if a big goalie would be offended by that. Like, man, I worked so hard on my conditioning, and now you're telling me my virtual player in the game tires faster because I'm a 6'4" monster. But no, I totally get the sentiment that you're you're throwing out, right? There's definitely tons of ways we can connect the system into a lot of those different attributes and physical attributes of the players as well.
Yeah, I think it opens up a lot of interesting things for the attributes in the game, and I'm curious to see what you guys have done, because again, the changes made so far are awesome. Let's talk about the poach check. Always a passionate one as well. Community feedback: the poach check has become too difficult to use on the new tuner changes for 24. Now, when I poach check, not only do I recover slower, but I also incur a speed loss, which allows the puck carrier to easily blow by me if the poach check fails to connect. I think that's something that was definitely an issue where even if you did do the poach check, the player would maybe just get it back, something like that. So on top of the speed nerf as well. So talk to me a little bit about what's happening with poach checking.
Yeah, I mean, pretty simple here. So we've just gotten rid of the speed loss that we've added in 24 and reverted back to the NHL 23 tuning. So again, 23 we made a few changes. The game has sometimes defensively been the poke check game because it's the best, safest, easiest way to separate player from puck. And obviously this year's been a lot of work to bring the physical side in and having a more balanced toolbox. So in some of that approach and making sure the physical part of the game became something that had more utility, we looked at the poke check again, but I think we just went a little bit too far and the feedback was good. So that's easy enough to walk back and it'll be in line with what we had in 23. I think it's interesting, like, playing hockey for as many years as I had, to think a poke check would be such a hot topic, right? But it's true, like the poke check in the NHL series has been just one of these things that
again, I think it just goes back to defense in the NHL video games become so safe. Again, we have the term skill zone, where you basically just sit in the middle and your AI does everything. And I think that was kind of made the biggest in NHL 18. And there's been things to combat that as we go along. But poke checking has always been something, again, because you're collapsing, you're playing less aggressive. You don't need to hit and potentially get out of position. And it's definitely something that is always going to be a hot topic for discussion. So excited to see how it feels with reverting back to last year's game in terms of the poach check speed loss. Last thing that we are going to see in the tuner update would be the general gameplay tuning. So nets come off way too much during gameplay, and you can actually try and skate at the net to stop a scoring chance without a penalty, which is a little bit unbalanced. And then the glass breaking way too often, making it a little bit rather annoying instead of it being kind of a fun moment. So what's coming for those two?
Yeah, so I mean, pretty simple stuff here. The nets are going to be knocked off much less. It does happen too often, and the fact that, not surprising that we had a prediction that people are going to figure out that they'd probably come off too easy, and then you see a 2-on-1. Better to turn around, hightail to the net as a defender and try to knock the net off, because there's no penalty for that. So that's been ratcheted down, and then glass breaking. Cool moment and all that stuff, but definitely happening way too much. And so, not tune it out of the game, but we'll tune it down so that you still get the odd moment, a good check into the glass or a rip and slap shot that breaks the glass, but it should be far less frequently. A lot of that stuff was over-tuned again for CPT so people could see the moment, and we weren't surprised that the glass breaking feedback came in as it did, and I think people will be happy with the better balance that's there. It's not something you should see over and over and over again. It kind of wears off, the shine comes off of it quite quickly.
Well, personally, I think that all of these changes are going to be really, really fun to try out. I'm excited to see as we go along with, substantial changes in gameplay coming from NHL 23 to 24. And then just the substantial changes coming, about a month later. I think this is definitely on the right path leading into NHL 24. So last question I have is essentially about gameplay updates. NHL 23, we really didn't receive any gameplay updates during the game, and the community was rather vocal about that, myself included. What are you and your team's plans for updates throughout the game, NHL 24 and the cycle, when it comes to actual gameplay updates that would be implemented during the game cycle?
Yeah, I mean, so I can start off there with saying, so people understand as well, we're a self-contained development team. Anytime we do a patch so when 24 comes out, we're already working on 25 and trying to put in the hours on that to make that game as good as it can be. Anytime we chase, say, a patch halfway through the 24 cycle, that's time that comes off of what we're doing for 25. So there's always a balance of making sure we're putting the right time into the right thing. From a game philosophy perspective, obviously, if we have something that is completely game breaking, completely exploitable, really hard to defend against, and there's like this always thing that continues to happen, we would look at that stuff really, really closely, because we don't want to have stuff out there that is just breaking the experience or taking, again, this year, all the changes to the meta and whittling it down to one thing, right? So if there becomes this ultimate exploit, we would look at that really hard. And if it's a massive problem, we'll make a fix on something like that. If it's other things that are subjective and you can kind of have water cooler conversations, because there's always going to be something sort of middle of the road that's going to be debatable. Some people might say, yeah, that's an exploit. Other people might say, why don't you just play better defense and don't let that happen. That stuff we would probably look at as well, but maybe not be as fast to act based on the sentiment that's around it. So it's a delicate balance, because again, we have to continue looking at the next product when it's coming out, but also make sure that the integrity of this one is in place. And so that's the perspective that we use going forward. And hopefully with these changes and what goes out, done a lot of work in the goalies. Hopefully, again, like glitch goals, things like that. Video games are always there to be sort of mastered, and people find new things that are there. But hopefully, we've done a good enough job this year that there's I'm going to say no exploits, because I've worked in games.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
Yeah, if there's something that's really game breaking, trust me when I say that we'll look at it really closely. And if it's a massive problem that's hurting the integrity of the game, we'll look at fixing problems like that.
Let me ask you this before I let you go. When it comes to animations and stopping and different goals that come out where you've really got to change animations and things like that, obviously that's going to be a lot more time intensive. But a lot of these changes are based on just tuners, where it's essentially tuning down the amount of times that sticks break, or 30% less, the removing or dialing back the ability to just skate around in the offensive zone to get the sustained pressure system to go full. Is it easier for your team to make those changes as opposed to the animation-based ones? And if that is the case, do you think that we'll see, maybe as the season goes along, where maybe we make more adjustments to the sustained pressure system?
So those changes, like in theory, from from a straight dev perspective, they are easier, but there's other layers to consider. There's things like our testing team. There's also just because you've made a change in one place doesn't mean it's not going to have a knock-on problem somewhere else in the game. And I've been doing games for a long time now, and sometimes a simple tuning change that looks safe on the surface sometimes touches things deep down within the code that we were unaware that it touched. And so you might have made a change and all of a sudden an ugly bug pops up. So when we make a change, we still have to put it through QA. We still have to make sure that the product is stable. And so again, all those people, right, are working on the next game as well. So anything can be done. It just starts to take away from what's there. So and I'll say as well, we go from 24 and then, again, we start working on the next game, and, we're always listening. And the idea here is this relationship with the community, from my point of view, because I haven't been here that long, it's just kind of getting started. So, we have the future releases to put things in as well. And so I wish it was easy just snapping a finger and putting tuning out, because that would be the best situation. But unfortunately, there's layers of development that go into even the smallest changes on the surface. And I think that's just important for people to understand, right? And again, being a self-contained team, our time goes from one place to the other, and we just have to choose where the best investment is as we go through year after year.
I want to say thank you for your time and the transparency from the team this year. Again, it's a vast improvement over NHL 23, and you've got the community a lot more excited for NHL 24, and it's good to see that you're listening to the feedback and making these changes, especially so quickly. So just want to say thank you for that, and thanks again for hopping on and breaking down this tuner update. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody out there that played and sent the feedback in. It's the start of hopefully a great relationship for a long time.
That's going to do it for us today. Be sure to check out EA NHL social channels for all of the up-to-date info when it comes to NHL 24, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.